Marcus was alone now, as he had been for the past 6 days. The ship's medical bay had patched the worst of his wounds, but he could feel infection setting in around the edges of the bandages. His left arm hung useless at his side, and every breath sent sharp pains through his cracked ribs. The stimulant injections that kept him conscious were running low. The forward view screen showed nothing but tumbling rocks and distant stars, but Marcus knew they were out there. The Keth-Moran patrol fleet swept through this sector every 48 hours, methodical as clockwork. They had been hunting him since the evacuation of New Geneva, the last human colony in the Outer Rim. He had managed to slip past their blockade with a hold full of refugees, but the Echo was never meant to run a gauntlet against warships that could atomize a moon. The refugees were gone now, jettisoned in escape pods when the Echo took critical damage 12 days ago. Marcus had watched the pods scatter across space, each one carrying families toward uncertain fates in the cold void. Some pods had functional beacons. Others had been damaged in the attack. He told himself they would find safe passage to neutral territory, but the math was brutal. Without faster-than-light capability, most would drift for years before reaching inhabited systems. A soft chime from the navigation console interrupted his thoughts. The proximity sensors had detected something moving through the asteroid field. Marcus forced himself upright, ignoring the fresh wave of pain that shot through his spine. The sensor display showed a contact approximately 2 kilometers off the starboard bow, moving in a search pattern. The contact was small, roughly the size of a fighter craft, but its energy signature was all wrong for a Keth-Moran vessel. Marcus enhanced the sensor sweep and felt his breath catch in his throat. The ship was human-built, an old reconnaissance scout from the Colonial Defense Force. Its hull bore the scorch marks of recent combat, but it was intact and under power. Marcus activated the short-range communicator, keeping the transmission tight-beam to avoid detection. Unknown vessel, this is Captain Marcus Cole of the merchant ship Defiance Echo. Please respond. Static filled the channel for several seconds before a voice cut through the interference. Captain Cole? Holy hell, we thought you were dead. This is Lieutenant Commander Sarah Voss, CBF Intelligence. We've been tracking your ship's ion trail for 3 days. The relief that flooded through Marcus was so intense it left him lightheaded. Commander Voss, what's your status? Are there other human ships in the area? Negative, Captain. The Shadowhawk is all that's left of the Epsilon Squadron. We were conducting deep reconnaissance when the Keth-Moran hit New Geneva. By the time we got back, the colony was nothing but radioactive debris. Voss paused, and Marcus could hear the exhaustion in her voice. We've been running silent ever since, trying to establish contact with other survivors. Marcus checked his sensor displays again. The asteroid field provided good cover, but it wouldn't hide them forever. Commander, we need to discuss extraction protocols. My ship is critically damaged, but I have cargo that needs to reach Earth Command. Understood, Captain. I'm reading massive structural damage to your vessel. How many crew do you have? The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. He stared at the emergency blankets covering his friends, people who had trusted him to get them home safely.
I'm the only survivor, Commander. The channel went silent for nearly 30 seconds.
When Voss spoke again, her voice was carefully controlled. Copy that, Captain. I'm sorry for your loss. We'll coordinate a pickup in 6 hours when the patrol cycle moves to the next sector. Can your ship maintain position until then? Marcus ran a quick diagnostic on the remaining systems. Life support was stable for another 18 hours. The reactor was operating at 15% capacity, enough to maintain minimal power. Most importantly, the cargo bay environmental seals were still intact. Affirmative, Commander. I'll be here. After closing the communication link, Marcus made his way to the cargo bay. The Echo had been carrying standard trade goods when the evacuation order came through. Medical supplies, food concentrates, industrial equipment. But hidden beneath false deck plates was something far more valuable than luxury items or colonial exports. Marcus activated his security override and watched as a concealed panel slid open to reveal a reinforced storage compartment. Inside, protected by military-grade encryption and biological locks, were 12 data cores containing the complete archives of human technological development. Everything from basic metallurgy to quantum computing, from primitive combustion engines to the latest advances in antimatter containment. The accumulated knowledge of 800 years of human innovation. The archives represented humanity's insurance policy against extinction. Copies had been stored on dozens of worlds throughout human space, each one guarded by specially selected crews who understood the weight of their responsibility. When the Keth-Moran Dominion declared war on humanity 3 years ago, the archive ships had scattered to the winds, carrying the seeds of human civilization to hidden locations across the galaxy. Most of the archive ships had been hunted down and destroyed. Marcus had received the final transmission from the Stellar Guardian 2 weeks ago, just before the Keith Moran found their hiding place in the Vega Nebula. The Echo was possibly the last remaining archive ship in known space. Marcus carefully extracted one of the data cores and connected it to his personal tablet. The interface required biometric confirmation, retinal scan, DNA sample, and neural pattern recognition. When the locks disengaged, he found himself looking at the index for the Prometheus project. The Prometheus data had been classified at the highest levels of Earth Command security. Marcus had only learned about it during the chaos of New Geneva's evacuation, when Admiral Chen transferred the access codes to him along with his final orders. According to the files, Prometheus was a theoretical weapons program that had been shelved 200 years ago after its creators realized the implications of their work. The research dealt with something called cascade fusion, a process that could theoretically turn any star into a weapon by destabilizing its nuclear processes. The calculations were elegant in their simplicity, requiring only precise timing and a delivery system capable of reaching a star's core. Once initiated, the cascade effect would spread throughout the stellar mass, causing the star to collapse into a black hole within minutes. Marcus studied the technical specifications with growing unease. The weapon design was surprisingly compact, requiring no exotic materials or impossible manufacturing tolerances. Any civilization with basic antimatter technology could build a cascade device. The only thing that had prevented its development was the moral weight of wielding such destructive power. A proximity alarm jerked Marcus back to the present. The sensor display showed multiple contacts approaching through the asteroid field, moving in formation. The energy signatures were unmistakably Keth Moran, and they were heading directly toward the Echo's position. Marcus frantically activated the ship's passive sensors, trying to determine how many ships were in the search formation. The display resolved into 6 patrol corvettes and 2 heavy cruisers, enough firepower to sterilize a small planet. They were conducting a methodical sweep of the asteroid field, using powerful sensor arrays to penetrate the electromagnetic interference generated by the tumbling rocks. The Shadow Hawk was nowhere to be seen. Either Commander Voss had detected the incoming patrol and gone dark, or she had been discovered and destroyed. Marcus was on his own again, trapped in a crippled ship with cargo that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. The lead Keth Moran corvette passed within 500 meters of the Echo's hiding place. Marcus held his breath as the alien ship's sensors swept across his position. The Echo's stealth systems were minimal, designed for avoiding pirates rather than military-grade detection equipment. If the Keth Moran wanted to find him, they would. The corvette continued its patrol pattern, apparently satisfied that the local asteroids contained nothing of interest. Marcus allowed himself a moment of hope before remembering that the Keth Moran were methodical hunters. They would be back with deeper scanning equipment, and next time they might not be fooled by his ship's minimal stealth systems. Marcus made his way to the ship's communication array and began composing a message. The transmission would be encoded using protocols known only to Earth Command, but he had no guarantee it would reach its destination. Too many human worlds had gone silent in recent months, and the Keth Moran were intercepting more human communications every day. The message was brief. Archive 7 intact. Prometheus data secured. Will attempt delivery to Earth. If I fail, remember that humanity's greatest strength was never our technology. It was our refusal to surrender. Marcus attached the Echo's current coordinates and sensor logs, then initiated the transmission burst. The message would propagate across subspace using relay beacons scattered throughout this sector of the galaxy. With luck, it would reach Earth Command within a few days. More likely, it would be intercepted by Keth Moran intelligence assets and used to track down the remaining human refugees. Marcus returned to the cargo bay and spent the next hour reviewing the Prometheus files. The theoretical framework was sound, but the practical implementation required precise calculations based on the target star's mass, composition, and rotational characteristics. More importantly, the delivery system had to survive the incredible gravitational forces and radiation levels near a star's core. According to the research notes, the original Prometheus team had designed their device to be deployed by an unmanned probe. The probe would approach the target star using a series of gravitational slingshot maneuvers, building up enough velocity to penetrate the stellar photosphere. Once inside the star, the probe would navigate to the core using gravity sensors and deploy the Cascade device at precisely the right moment. The calculations showed that Keth Moran's home system contained a Class G star very similar to Earth's Sun. The star was stable and middle-aged, perfect for Cascade fusion. A single successful deployment would destroy not only the Keth Moran homeworld, but also the massive orbital shipyards that produced their fleet. Marcus closed the files and stared at the cargo bay bulkhead. The Prometheus data represented the power to commit genocide on an unimaginable scale. The Kethmoran Dominion controlled over 3,000 worlds, but their civilization was centralized around their home system. Destroying Kethmoran would cripple their entire empire, possibly saving the millions of humans still trapped in labor camps across dominated space. But it would also make humanity complicit in the destruction of an entire species. The Kethmoran were conquerors and slavers, but they were also sentient beings with families and cultures and dreams of their own. Using the Prometheus weapon would make humans no better than the genocidal empires they fought against. A second proximity alarm brought Marcus back to immediate concerns. The sensor display showed that the Kethmoran patrol had completed its sweep and was moving toward the outer edge of the asteroid field. But one of the cruisers had separated from the formation and was circling back, its massive bulk dwarfing the surrounding asteroids. Marcus watched the cruiser's approach with growing dread. The ship was nearly a kilometer long, bristling with weapon emplacements and sensor arrays. Its hull bore the crimson markings of the Third Dominion Fleet, the elite force responsible for hunting down human resistance cells. If they had detected the echo, Marcus would have perhaps 30 seconds before the ship was vaporized. The cruiser moved past the echo's position without slowing, but its sensor sweep was more thorough this time. Marcus saw his ship's energy signature spike as the Kethmoran sensors penetrated their minimal shielding. For a moment, the two ships hung motionless in space, predator and prey separated by less than 2 kilometers of vacuum. Then the cruiser's weapon systems powered up, and Marcus knew his luck had finally run out. He had perhaps 10 minutes before the Kethmoran boarding parties arrived to claim their prize. 10 minutes to decide whether humanity's survival was worth the price of galactic genocide. Marcus returned to the cargo bay and began downloading the Prometheus files to his personal tablet. If he was going to die, he would at least deny the Kethmoran access to humanity's greatest weapon. But, as he worked, another possibility began to form in his mind. The Echo was critically damaged, but her antimatter containment system was still functional. And Marcus had just learned how to turn any star into a weapon. Perhaps there was one more card left to play after all. The Kethmoran boarding pods attached to the Echo's hull with metallic thuds that echoed through the ship's damaged corridors. Marcus crouched in the cargo bay, his tablet displaying the final stages of the data transfer. The Prometheus files were enormous, containing not just theoretical frameworks, but detailed engineering specifications, test results, and targeting algorithms. Each gigabyte represented years of research by humanity's finest minds. Through the ship's internal sensors, Marcus watched 12 Kethmoran soldiers methodically advance through the corridors. They moved with the practiced efficiency of an elite unit, their powered armor gleaming under the emergency lighting. Each soldier carried weapons capable of punching through reinforced bulkheads, but they were being careful not to damage anything that might contain valuable intelligence. The lead soldier spoke in the clicking harmonic language of the Dominion. Marcus had learned enough Kethmoran during his years as a merchant captain to understand the basics. They were discussing the human bodies on the bridge, analyzing the ship's configuration, and speculating about its cargo. One soldier mentioned detecting unusual energy signatures from the lower decks. Marcus finished the download and activated the tablet's military-grade security protocols. The device would wipe itself completely if tampered with, taking the Prometheus data with it. But first, he needed to study the weapon specifications more carefully. The original research team had been brilliant, but they had worked in a laboratory setting with unlimited resources and perfect conditions. Marcus had to adapt their designs for deployment from a crippled cargo ship. The Cascade fusion device itself was surprisingly simple in concept. It used a controlled antimatter reaction to destabilize the quantum bonds holding together the star's nuclear fuel. Once the cascade began, it would spread throughout the stellar mass faster than light, turning the star into a black hole within minutes. The challenge was delivering the device to the star's core and activating it at precisely the right moment. Marcus pulled up the targeting data for Kethmoran Prime, the Dominion's homeworld. The system's star was designated KM1 in human astronomical databases, a G-type main sequence star, roughly 92 million miles from its primary planet. The star was stable and predictable, with well-documented solar activity patterns. Perfect for cascade fusion. The original Prometheus team had designed their delivery system around a specialized probe capable of surviving the journey to a star's core. But Marcus didn't have access to military-grade manufacturing facilities. He would have to improvise using whatever materials were available on the Echo. A proximity sensor chimed softly as the Kethmoran soldiers reached the outer cargo bay. Marcus could hear them discussing the sealed bulkhead. debating whether to blast through it or attempt to access the manual controls. Their leader decided on caution, ordering his team to search for alternative entry points. Marcus used the reprieve to examine the Echo's specifications more carefully. The ship's antimatter containment system was built around a magnetic bottle design, using powerful electromagnetic fields to contain approximately 50 kilograms of antimatter fuel. Under normal circumstances, the antimatter was fed into the ship's reactor in microscopic quantities, providing power for the engines and life support systems. But with careful modifications, the entire containment system could be converted into a massive bomb. 50 kilos of antimatter would release approximately 4.3 exatons of energy when it contacted normal matter. That was equivalent to detonating 4 billion hydrogen bombs simultaneously. The energy release would be more than sufficient to initiate cascade fusion, but the delivery mechanism remained problematic. The Echo was too large and too damaged to approach a star closely enough for deployment. Even if the ship could somehow reach the outer layers of Kathmoran Prime's star, it would be vaporized long before reaching the core. Marcus needed a different approach. He scrolled through the Prometheus files until he found the theoretical work on remote activation. The original research team had considered the possibility of deploying multiple smaller devices throughout a solar system, each one capable of triggering cascade fusion from a safe distance. The concept relied on quantum entanglement between the cascade device and a trigger mechanism. Once the entangled particles were separated, activating the trigger would instantaneously affect its partner, regardless of distance. The effect would propagate through subspace, allowing the weapon to be activated from anywhere in the galaxy. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as he read the implications. With quantum entanglement, the Prometheus weapon could be deployed anywhere and activated remotely. A single ship could see dozens of enemy systems with dormant cascade devices, then trigger them simultaneously from across the galaxy. The strategic applications were terrifying. The cargo bay doors suddenly groaned as the Kathmoran soldiers applied cutting torches to the sealed entrance. Marcus estimated he had perhaps 5 minutes before they broke through. He quickly began copying specific sections of the Prometheus data to the ship's manufacturing computer, focusing on the components he could actually build using available materials. The Echo carried a basic fabrication unit designed for producing replacement parts during long cargo runs. The unit could work with most common metals and ceramics, but it wasn't designed for military applications. Marcus would have to simplify the cascade device design significantly. He settled on a hybrid approach. Instead of building a complete Prometheus weapon, he would create a much smaller device capable of destabilizing the Echo's own antimatter containment system. The resulting explosion wouldn't be large enough to trigger cascade fusion directly, but it might be sufficient to damage Kathmoran Prime's star in ways that would cause long-term instability. Marcus began uploading the modified specifications to the fabrication unit. The device would be roughly the size of a briefcase, containing quantum entanglement generators, antimatter triggers, and a navigation system capable of guiding it to its target. Most importantly, it would be virtually undetectable once deployed. The fabrication unit hummed to life, its robotic arms beginning to assemble the cascade device from raw materials stored in the ship's workshops. Marcus watched the progress display with growing anxiety. The manufacturing process would take approximately 23 minutes, but the Kathmoran soldiers were already halfway through the cargo bay doors. A new voice echoed through the ship's communication system, speaking an accented but fluent human standard. "Human vessel, this is War Commander, Thektar of the 3rd Dominion Fleet. You will surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will result in the destruction of your ship and the execution of all survivors." Marcus ignored the demand and focused on the fabrication unit. The device was taking shape slowly, layer by layer, as the unit's molecular assemblers built each component to precise specifications. The quantum entanglement generators were the most complex parts, requiring exotic materials that the Echo barely carried in sufficient quantities. The cutting torches finally burned through the cargo bay doors, and Kathmoran soldiers poured into the chamber. Marcus remained hidden behind a stack of supply crates, watching as the aliens spread out to search the area. Their powered armor made them look like mechanical insects, all sharp angles and gleaming chitin. One soldier approached the fabrication unit and examined its display screen. The alien clicked and whistled to his companions, clearly recognizing that the device was building something potentially dangerous. Marcus tensed, ready to defend the unit with his sidearm, but the soldier simply marked the location and continued his sweep. The Kathmoran were methodical in their search, checking every crate and container for signs of valuable cargo. They showed particular interest in the medical supplies, scanning each item with handheld devices. Marcus realized they were looking for specific items, possibly biological samples or advanced pharmaceuticals. War Commander Thektar entered the cargo bay, his armor more elaborate than his subordinates. The alien was tall even by Kethmoran standards, nearly 3 meters in height, with the distinctive crest markings that indicated high military rank. He surveyed the space with intelligent eyes, clearly analyzing the ship's configuration and cargo manifest. Thektar spoke to one of his soldiers in rapid Kethmoran, then switched to human standard. Captain Cole, I know you are present. Your ship's life support systems indicate a single human life sign in this compartment. Surrender now, and you will be treated according to Dominion military protocols. Marcus remained silent, crouched behind the supply crates, with his weapon ready. The fabrication unit continued its work, now approximately 60% complete. He needed to buy more time, but the Kethmoran were closing in on his position. Thektar gestured to his soldiers, who began systematically destroying the supply crates with controlled plasma bursts. They worked from the far end of the cargo bay, moving steadily toward Marcus's hiding place. Each destroyed container revealed standard trade goods, food concentrates, industrial equipment, basic medical supplies. Nothing that would explain why a human cargo ship had been running alone through Kethmoran space. Your resistance serves no purpose, Captain, Thektar continued. The human colonies have fallen. Your military forces have been scattered. There are no reinforcements coming to save you. Surrender, and you may live to see the end of this war. Marcus finally spoke, his voice echoing off the cargo bay walls. The war ended the moment you decided to enslave human worlds, Thektar. Everything since then has just been settling the bill. The Kethmoran war commander paused in his advance. You speak with the voice of defeat, human. Your species fought bravely, but you lack the unity necessary for galactic conquest. The Dominion brings order to chaos, purpose to random expansion. Under our rule, the surviving human populations will find peace. Peace? Marcus almost laughed. I've seen your peace, Thektar. I've seen the labor camps on Kepler 442. I've seen the mass graves on New Geneva. Your idea of peace is extinction with extra steps. The fabrication unit chimed softly, indicating that the cascade device was now 80% complete. Marcus could see the partially assembled weapon through the unit's transparent housing. It looked deceptively innocent, like a sophisticated piece of communications equipment rather than a weapon capable of destabilizing stars. Thektar's soldiers destroyed another row of supply crates, moving inexorably closer to Marcus's position. The war commander studied the fabrication unit with obvious interest. Curious. Your ship carries a military-grade manufacturing system, yet your vessel is registered as a civilian trader. Perhaps there is more to your mission than simple evacuation. Marcus shifted position slightly, trying to keep the supply crates between himself and the advancing soldiers. His wounded arm was throbbing, and the stimulant injections were wearing off. He probably had enough energy left for one final confrontation, but 12 armored soldiers were overwhelming odds even for a healthy Marine. The fabrication unit suddenly stopped, its display flashing an error message. One of the exotic materials required for the quantum entanglement generator had been exhausted. Marcus felt his heart sink as he realized the cascade device would be incomplete. Without proper quantum entanglement, the weapon would have to be manually activated at close range. Thektar noticed the fabrication unit's status change and moved to examine it more closely. The war commander's eyes widened as he read the partially completed specifications displayed on the screen. Fascinating. It appears you are attempting to construct some form of exotic weapon. Your human scientists continue to surprise us with their ingenuity. Marcus made his decision. He emerged from behind the supply crates with his hands visible, his sidearm holstered. The Kethmoran soldiers immediately trained their weapons on him, but Thektar gestured for them to hold fire. I surrender, Marcus said simply. But I want to propose an exchange. Thektar tilted his head, a gesture that Marcus had learned indicated curious interest among the Kethmoran. What could a defeated human captain possibly offer the Dominion? Marcus gestured toward the fabrication unit. That device contains theoretical frameworks for weapons technology your scientists have never seen. Technologies that could revolutionize your military capabilities. I am willing to provide you with complete technical specifications in exchange for safe passage to neutral territory. The war commander considered this offer carefully. Your species has already demonstrated considerable weapons innovation. The plasma torpedo designs you developed have proven surprisingly effective against our Corvette-class vessels. What makes you believe this particular technology would interest the Dominion? Marcus smiled grimly. Because this technology doesn't just destroy ships, Thektar. It destroys stars. The cargo bay fell silent except for the hum of life support systems and the distant drip of coolant from damaged pipes. Thektar stared at Marcus for several seconds, clearly evaluating whether the human was bluffing. Stellar manipulation has been attempted by numerous species throughout galactic history, Thektar said finally. The energy requirements are beyond the capabilities of any known technology. Are they? Marcus asked. Your own scientists must have considered the theoretical possibilities. What would happen if you could destabilize the quantum forces that hold the star together? How much energy would be required to trigger a cascade collapse? Thektar's crest markings darkened, a sign of deep thought among his species. Such technology would be problematic. The strategic implications would destabilize the current balance of power. Marcus nodded. Exactly. Which is why I'm offering it to you rather than letting it fall into the hands of human resistance cells. The war is over, Thektar, but the peace that follows depends on mutual understanding. The fabrication unit chimed again, indicating that the Cascade device construction had resumed using alternative materials. Marcus had rigged a backup sequence that would complete the weapon using components from the ship's navigation system. The device would be less sophisticated than the original design, but it would still be functional. Thektar noticed the status change and moved closer to examine the partially completed weapon. This device appears to be designed for deployment rather than laboratory testing. You intended to use this technology, not merely study it. The thought had crossed my mind, Marcus admitted. But practical deployment would require targeting data for enemy star systems, delivery mechanisms capable of reaching stellar cores, and activation protocols that could be executed from safe distances. I lack all of these capabilities. The war commander gestured to his soldiers, who began downloading data from the fabrication unit's memory banks. We will analyze your research in detail. If your claims prove accurate, the Dominion will consider your proposal for safe passage. Marcus watched the data transfer with growing unease. The Kethmoran would discover the true nature of the Prometheus weapon within hours. They would also realize that the partially completed device in the fabrication unit was designed for immediate deployment rather than scientific analysis. But Marcus had built one final surprise into his creation. Hidden within the Cascade device's navigation system was a quantum transmitter linked to the Echo's antimatter containment system. When the device was activated, it would send a coded signal back to the ship, triggering a catastrophic failure of the magnetic containment bottles. The resulting explosion would vaporize everything within a 50-kilometer radius, including the Kethmoran cruiser currently attached to the Echo's hull. Marcus would die in the explosion, but he would take Thektar and his elite troops with him. More importantly, the Cascade device would be destroyed before the Dominion could reverse engineer its secrets. Marcus calculated the timing carefully. He needed the Kethmoran to transport the device to their ship before he triggered the quantum transmitter. That would maximize the damage to Dominion forces while ensuring that the Prometheus technology remained hidden. The fabrication unit completed its work with a soft chime. The Cascade device lay in the output tray, looking harmless and unassuming. Thektar examined it carefully, scanning the device with various instruments built into his armor. The energy readings are minimal, the war commander observed. If this device is truly capable of stellar manipulation, it operates on principles our scientists do not understand. Marcus nodded. Quantum entanglement allows for effects that seem to violate conservation of energy. The device doesn't generate the energy needed for stellar collapse. It simply provides the trigger that allows the star to destroy itself. One of Thektar's soldiers carefully lifted the Cascade device from the fabrication unit. Marcus held his breath, waiting for the quantum transmitter to activate, but the device remained inert, its safety protocols preventing premature activation. Thektar turned back to Marcus. You will accompany us to the inevitable victory for detailed debriefing. Our scientists will require your expertise to fully understand this technology. Marcus smiled and reached for his tablet. Of course, War Commander. I'm sure your scientists will find the technology very illuminating. He activated the quantum transmitter, and the universe exploded into light. Admiral Zekthal stood on the command deck of the Dominion dreadnought Eternal Conquest, watching the debris field that had once been the cruiser, Inevitable Victory, tumble through space. The explosion had been visible from 3 star systems away, a brilliant flash that momentarily outshone the local sun. In 30 years of military service, Zektul had never seen anything like it. The Victory had been one of the Dominion's newest vessels, equipped with the latest in defensive technology and crewed by elite soldiers from the Third Fleet. Yet somehow, a single human cargo ship had destroyed it completely. The blast pattern suggested an antimatter containment failure, but the energy release had been far too large for a standard merchant vessel. Status report. Zakthul commanded, his crest markings displaying the deep purple of serious concern. Science Officer Velthar consulted her instruments before responding. The explosion registered approximately 4.7 exadons of released energy, consistent with the complete conversion of approximately 50 kilograms of antimatter to energy. However, Admiral, our intelligence reports indicate that human cargo ships typically carry no more than 5 kilograms of antimatter fuel. Zakthul studied the tactical display, noting the positions of the debris clusters. Was War Commander Thektar aboard the Victory when it was destroyed? Affirmative, Admiral. His boarding party had been investigating the human vessel for approximately 47 minutes before the explosion occurred. We lost all contact with the team at the moment of detonation. The Admiral's crest markings shifted to the orange of frustration. Thektar had been one of the Dominion's most effective commanders, responsible for the conquest of 14 human worlds over the past 2 years. His loss was a significant blow to Third Fleet operations. Have we recovered any useful debris from either vessel? Velthar manipulated her console, highlighting several objects on the tactical display. Recovery teams have located fragments of both ships scattered across a roughly spherical volume of space. Most of the debris shows signs of vaporization from the initial energy release, but we have found some intact components from the human vessel's cargo bay.
What type of components? Manufacturing equipment, Admiral.
The human ship appears to have been equipped with a military-grade fabrication unit. Our analysis suggests it was being used to construct some form of unknown device immediately before the explosion. Zakthul felt his crest markings shift to the red of alarm. Military fabrication units were restricted technology, forbidden to civilian vessels under both Dominion and human law. The cargo ship's captain had been building weapons. Have we identified the device that was under construction? Partially, Admiral. The fabrication unit's memory banks were heavily damaged, but our technicians have recovered fragmentary data. The device appears to have been designed around principles of quantum field manipulation. Zekthul moved to examine Velthar's sensor readings more closely. The debris field was still expanding, but the largest fragments were beginning to settle into predictable orbits around the system's primary star. Within a few days, most of the evidence would be scattered across millions of cubic kilometers of space. What was the human ship's original destination? Unknown, Admiral. The vessel's navigation logs were completely destroyed in the explosion. However, our analysis of its previous trajectory suggests it originated from the New Geneva system. The mention of New Geneva caused Zakthul's crest markings to darken further. The human colony had been the site of one of the war's most decisive battles, where Dominion forces had finally broken the last major human fleet. The victory had been costly, requiring the complete sterilization of the planet's surface to eliminate hidden resistance cells. Were there any survivors from the New Geneva evacuation? Intelligence reports indicate that several human vessels escaped the blockade during the final assault. Most were civilian transports carrying refugees to neutral systems. This cargo ship may have been one of those evacuation vessels. Zekthul considered the implications. If the human captain had been carrying advanced weapons technology, it suggested that the evacuation of New Geneva had been more than a desperate flight from overwhelming force. The humans might have been implementing a contingency plan, preserving their most dangerous secrets for use in future resistance operations. The Admiral activated the ship's long-range communication array and composed a priority message to Dominion High Command. The destruction of the inevitable Victory was more than a tactical setback. It represented a fundamental shift in the nature of the conflict. For 3 years, the war against humanity had followed predictable patterns. Human forces relied on superior mobility and innovation to offset their numerical disadvantages, while Dominion fleets used overwhelming firepower to methodically reduce human strongholds. Both sides understood the rules of engagement, and both sides fought within the accepted boundaries of interstellar warfare. But the cargo ship's final act suggested that humanity was prepared to abandon those boundaries. No previous human weapon had been capable of destroying a Dominion cruiser through sheer explosive force. The energy release from the Echo's destruction exceeded anything in the known human arsenal. Zekthul's meditation was interrupted by an urgent transmission from the communications officer. Admiral, we're receiving a coded signal from Dominion intelligence. Priority classification. The message appeared on Zekthul's personal display, encrypted with the highest level of military security. As he read the contents, his crest markings shifted through several different colors before settling on the pale blue of deep shock. The transmission contained intelligence reports from across human-controlled space. Over the past 72 hours, Dominion forces had lost contact with 17 different patrol groups. In each case, the last communication had mentioned detecting damaged human vessels in asteroid fields or nebula regions. Then, silence. The pattern was unmistakable. Humanity was conducting a coordinated campaign of desperate attacks, using heavily damaged ships as weapons against Dominion forces. But the scale of destruction suggested something more sophisticated than simple suicide tactics. Zekthul composed a response to High Command, requesting permission to investigate the wreckage of the Echo more thoroughly. If the humans had developed new weapons technology, the Dominion needed to understand its capabilities before more ships were lost. The reply came back within minutes, carrying the personal authorization of Supreme War Leader Koltan himself. Zekthul was directed to assemble a full scientific investigation team and conduct a complete analysis of the debris field. Any recovered technology was to be transferred immediately to the Dominion research stations in the Proxima system. As Zekthul prepared the investigation teams, his science officer made an unexpected discovery. Admiral, our deep space sensors are detecting unusual energy signatures from the local star. Zekthul moved to examine the stellar observation displays. The system's primary star appeared normal in all visible spectra, but sophisticated gravitational sensors were detecting minute fluctuations in its core density. What type of fluctuations? The variations appear to be quantum in nature, Admiral. Something is affecting the nuclear binding forces in the star's core region. The effect is minimal, but it appears to be growing stronger. Zekthul felt a chill of premonition. How long until the fluctuations become significant? Velthar ran calculations on her instruments. At the current rate of change, the stellar core will become unstable within approximately 6 months. However, Admiral, this type of stellar manipulation should be impossible with any known technology. The Admiral stared at the stellar readings, remembering fragments of reports from the war's early phases. Human scientists had always shown remarkable innovation in their weapons development, creating technologies that the Dominion's more conservative military doctrine had failed to anticipate. Plasma torpedoes, gravitic mines, quantum stealth systems. Each new human innovation had required the Dominion to adapt its tactics. But this was different. If humanity had developed the capability to manipulate stellar processes, the strategic balance of the entire galaxy was at stake. No fleet could defend against weapons that could destroy entire star systems. Zekthul activated the emergency communication channels and began transmitting warning signals to all Dominion forces in the sector. If the humans were using stellar manipulation weapons, every ship in the area was potentially at risk. The investigation teams worked frantically to recover useful debris from the Echo. Most of the cargo ship's structure had been vaporized in the antimatter explosion, but fragments of the fabrication unit's memory core were found embedded in a piece of bulkhead plating. The data recovery process would take weeks, but preliminary analysis suggested the unit had been building something far more sophisticated than conventional weapons. While the recovery teams worked, Zekthul studied intelligence reports from other sectors of the war zone. The pattern of attacks was becoming clearer. Human vessels were targeting specific types of Dominion ships, cruisers equipped with advanced sensor arrays, research vessels carrying scientific personnel, and command ships with high-ranking officers. The attacks seemed designed to eliminate the Dominion's intelligence-gathering capabilities. More troubling were reports of unusual stellar activity in systems where human attacks had occurred. Stars were showing signs of instability, developing solar flare patterns that defied conventional astrophysics. In 3 cases, entire star systems had been evacuated as precautionary measures. Zekthul realized that humanity was fighting a different war than the one the Dominion thought it was winning. While Dominion fleets conquered human colonies and destroyed human fleets, human scientists had been developing weapons that could threaten the Dominion's home systems. The tactical victories that the Dominion celebrated might be irrelevant if humanity could destabilize the stars that supported Dominion civilization. The Admiral composed another message to High Command, this one carrying his most urgent recommendations. The Dominion needed to reassess its strategic priorities immediately. The conquest of human worlds was secondary to the need to eliminate humanity's capacity for stellar manipulation. But as Zekthul sent the transmission, he realized that it might already be too late. If human ships had seeded weapons throughout Dominion space, the activation sequence might already be in motion. The Dominion's own momentum might be carrying it towards destruction. The science officer interrupted his thoughts with another urgent report. Admiral, we're detecting quantum entanglement signatures in the debris field. Something appears to be maintaining active communication links with distant targets. Zekthul felt his crest markings shift to the white of fear. Quantum entanglement allowed for instantaneous communication across galactic distances. If the humans had embedded quantum transmitters in their weapons, they could coordinate attacks across the entire Dominion simultaneously. Can we trace the entanglement links? Negative, Admiral. The quantum signatures are too dispersed to localize. However, the communication patterns suggest that whatever the human captain was building, it was designed to interface with devices in multiple star systems. Zekthul stared at the tactical display, watching the debris field continue to expand. Somewhere in that cloud of wreckage was evidence of humanity's ultimate weapon. But recovering that evidence might not matter if the weapon had already been deployed. The Admiral opened a direct communication channel to the Dominion homeworld, using the highest priority codes available to field commanders. Supreme War Leader Koltan needed to understand that the war against humanity had entered a new phase. As Zekthul began composing his report, another alarm sounded from the Stellar Observation Station. The fluctuations in the star's core were accelerating, growing stronger with each passing hour. Whatever process the human captain had initiated was beginning to cascade through the stellar mass. Zekthul calculated the time remaining before the star became critically unstable. Even with the most optimistic projections, the Eternal Conquest and her escort fleet had perhaps 8 hours to complete their investigation and evacuate the system. But 8 hours might not be enough time to uncover humanity's greatest secret, and without that knowledge, the Dominion might face extinction at the hands of an enemy they had already defeated. The Admiral gave orders to accelerate the recovery operation, knowing that he was racing against the countdown timer of a dying star. Somewhere in the expanding debris field was the key to humanity's ultimate weapon. He could only hope that finding it would not cost the Dominion everything they had fought to build. Supreme War Leader Koltan stood before the vast holographic display in the Dominion Strategic Command Center, watching in real time as red warning indicators appeared across the galactic map. Each indicator represented a star system where Dominion forces had reported unusual stellar activity. In the past 6 hours, the number of affected systems had grown from 12 to 47. The pattern was undeniable. Across 3,000 light-years of Dominion space, stars were beginning to show signs of quantum instability. Solar flare activity had increased by 800% in affected systems. Gravitational anomalies were causing orbital disruptions around major planets. Most alarming of all, several stars were showing early signs of core collapse. "Status report," Koltan commanded, his massive frame dominating the command center. At nearly 4 meters in height, the Supreme War Leader was an imposing figure, even among the Kethmoran military elite. His ceremonial armor bore the battle honors of 24 campaigns, marking him as one of the most successful military commanders in Dominion history. General Thexalon approached the display, her own crest markings showing the orange patterns of extreme stress. "War Leader, our astrophysics division has confirmed that the stellar instabilities are artificial in nature. Something is systematically disrupting the quantum forces that maintain stellar cohesion." Koltan studied the tactical display, noting the distribution of affected systems. The pattern wasn't random. Every compromised star was located in a sector where human ships had been detected over the past month. The correlation was too precise to be coincidental. "What is the current estimate for cascade progression?" "Our scientists believe that once the quantum cascade reaches critical mass in any given star, the collapse process will take between 6 and 18 hours. However, War Leader, we've also detected quantum entanglement signatures linking the affected stars." If the humans trigger a coordinated collapse, Koltan's crest marking shifted to the deep red of controlled fury. The implications were staggering. If humanity could coordinate the collapse of 50 stars simultaneously, the resulting destruction would cripple the Dominion's core systems. Millions of worlds would be left without their primary energy sources. Entire sectors would become uninhabitable. "Do we have any intelligence on the human deployment methods?" General Thexalon activated a secondary display showing reconnaissance data from Admiral Zekthul's investigation. "The evidence suggests that human ships have been sacrificing themselves to deploy quantum weapons near our star systems. Each weapon appears to be small enough to escape detection, but sophisticated enough to initiate stellar cascade reactions." The Supreme War Leader examined the debris analysis reports from the Echo incident. The human cargo ship had been carrying military-grade fabrication equipment and enough antimatter to power a battlecruiser. More importantly, the partially recovered data suggested that the weapon under construction had been designed for immediate deployment rather than testing. "Have we determined how many human ships might be carrying these weapons?" Intelligence estimates suggest that between 20 and 30 human vessels escaped during the evacuation of major colonies. Most were thought to be refugee transports, but it appears they may have been archive ships carrying advanced military technology. Koltan felt a grudging respect for humanity's strategic planning. While Dominion forces had been focused on military targets and population centers, human leaders had been implementing a scorched earth protocol. If they could not save their civilization, they would ensure that their conquerors paid the ultimate price for victory. The Supreme War Leader activated the emergency communication protocols and began transmitting evacuation orders to all Dominion forces in affected systems. The process would take days to complete, and many ships would not be able to reach safe distances before the stellar collapses began. But abandoning entire fleets was preferable to losing the core worlds of Dominion civilization. As the evacuation orders propagated across subspace, Coltan received an urgent transmission from the Intelligence Division. The message contained analysis of quantum signatures detected in the Proxima system, home to the Dominion's primary research facilities. The signatures were identical to those found in other compromised systems. Coltan's crest marking shifted to the pale white of shock. Proxima Centauri was more than just a research center. It was the location of the Dominion strategic archives, containing the accumulated knowledge of 3,000 years of galactic conquest. If Proxima's star collapsed, the Dominion would lose not just its research capabilities but also its historical memory. Initiate emergency protocols for the Proxima evacuation, Coltan commanded. All essential personnel and archives are to be transferred to backup facilities immediately. General Thexalan consulted her tactical displays. War Leader, the evacuation of Proxima will require the redeployment of 18 battle groups. This will leave our core systems vulnerable to any remaining human resistance forces.
The humans no longer need conventional forces to threaten our core systems, Coltan replied grimly.
If they can collapse our stars at will, no amount of military protection will matter. The Supreme War Leader walked to the central holographic display and manipulated the controls to show the estimated blast radii if all compromised stars collapse simultaneously. The resulting map showed massive dead zones stretching across Dominion space. Nearly 40% of Dominion worlds would be directly affected, with secondary effects spreading to thousands of additional systems. But as Coltan studied the destruction patterns, he noticed something significant. The human weapon deployment had avoided certain sectors entirely. The border regions with neutral powers showed no signs of stellar instability. Similarly, systems containing significant non-human populations appeared to have been spared. General, analyze the targeting patterns more carefully. Why have the humans avoided certain sectors? Thexalon manipulated the display to highlight the unaffected regions. It appears that humanity has deliberately targeted only purely Dominion systems. War Leader. They have avoided any systems that would cause collateral damage to neutral or allied species. The realization struck Coltan like a physical blow. Even in their final desperate gambit, the humans were adhering to their principles about protecting innocent life. They could have seeded weapons throughout the galaxy, threatening every major civilization with extinction. Instead, they had carefully targeted only Dominion military and administrative centers. It was a level of restraint that the Dominion would never have shown in similar circumstances. When the Dominion conquered a system, they typically eliminated all potential threats, including civilian populations that might harbor resistance movements. But humanity was offering the Dominion the same mercy they had denied to countless other species. The Supreme War Leader opened a secure communication channel to the Dominion High Council. The political implications of the current crisis extended far beyond military considerations. If word of humanity's stellar weapons reached the neutral powers, it could trigger a galactic arms race that would destabilize the entire region. Honored counselors, Colfan began, I must report that our conflict with humanity has entered a critical phase. Human forces have deployed weapons capable of stellar manipulation across multiple Dominion systems. We estimate that coordinated activation could result in the collapse of 57 stars. The response from the High Council was immediate and predictable. Councillor Vextaran's voice carried the harmonic patterns of outrage and disbelief. This is impossible, War Leader. No species possesses the technology for large-scale stellar manipulation. Nevertheless, Councillor, the evidence is conclusive. Human scientists have developed quantum cascade weapons capable of destabilizing stellar cores. More importantly, they appear to have deployed these weapons as a final contingency measure. The council chamber fell silent as the councillors absorbed the implications. The Dominion's entire strategic doctrine was based on the premise that conventional military force could overcome any threat. The possibility that a defeated enemy could destroy Dominion civilization from beyond the grave challenged the fundamental assumptions of their society. Councillor Techmoran spoke next, her voice carefully controlled. What are our options, War Leader? Coltan had been considering that question since the first reports of stellar instability. We have three possible courses of action. First, we can attempt to locate and disarm the human weapons before they are activated. Second, we can evacuate all personnel from affected systems and accept the loss of infrastructure. Third, we can attempt to negotiate with any surviving human leaders. The suggestion of negotiation caused an immediate uproar among the council members. The Keth Moran had not negotiated with an inferior species in over 1,000 years. Their entire cultural identity was built around the concept of military dominance. But Councillor Vexteran's response was surprisingly pragmatic. What would humanity demand in exchange for deactivating their weapons? Unknown, Councillor. Our intelligence suggests that most human leadership was eliminated during the conquest phase. However, there may be surviving archive ship crews who possess the activation codes. Coltan manipulated the holographic display to show the estimated positions of remaining human vessels. Intelligence placed approximately 15 archive ships in various locations throughout the Outer Rim. Most were thought to be heavily damaged and operating with minimal crew complements. General Fexelon, what are our chances of locating and capturing the remaining human ships? Minimal, War Leader. The ships appear to be operating in deep space, avoiding regular patrol routes. Our search efforts would require deploying substantial forces across thousands of cubic light-years. Coltan studied the tactical situation carefully. The Dominion's vast military machine was designed for conventional conquest operations, not for hunting small groups of desperate survivors. Every day spent searching for human ships was another day that the stellar weapons remained active. The Supreme War Leader made his decision. Initiate contact protocols with all known human survivors. Offer to negotiate terms for the deactivation of their stellar weapons. The announcement caused another wave of protests from the High Council. Councillor Zaktoon's crest markings displayed the deep purple of traditional outrage. War Leader, this sets a dangerous precedent. If we negotiate with defeated enemies, other species will believe they can threaten us with similar weapons. Councillor, if we do not negotiate, we may not survive long enough to worry about future threats, Coltan replied. The humans have demonstrated that conventional military superiority means nothing if your enemy is willing to destroy everything rather than accept defeat. As the debate continued, alarms began sounding throughout the command center. The Stellar Monitoring Station reported that quantum cascade effects were accelerating in 12 systems. The estimated time until critical collapse had decreased from 18 hours to 6 hours. Coltan felt the weight of command pressing down on him like a physical force. In 6 hours, the Dominion might begin losing entire star systems. In 12 hours, Dominion civilization as he knew it might cease to exist. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, human survivors held the power to prevent or trigger the greatest catastrophe in galactic history. The Supreme War Leader activated the Dominion's highest priority communication channels and began transmitting on all frequencies used by human ships. The message was simple and direct. To any surviving human commanders, this is Supreme War Leader Coltan of the Kathmoran Dominion. We are prepared to discuss terms for ending our conflict. Respond immediately. As the transmission propagated across subspace, Colton wondered if any humans remained alive to receive it, and if they did, whether they would choose mercy over vengeance for the billions of their people who had already died. The countdown to stellar collapse continued, marking the seconds until the Dominion learned whether humanity's greatest weapon was their technology or their capacity for forgiveness. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Voss sat alone in the cramped command center of the reconnaissance ship Shadowhawk, staring at the subspace transmission that had arrived 23 minutes ago. The message from Supreme War Leader Coltan played on repeat, each word carrying the weight of impossible decisions. Sarah was now the highest-ranking human military officer in known space. Admiral Chen had died in the defense of New Geneva. General Morrison had been killed during the evacuation of Kepler. 442. Captain Rodriguez had sacrificed herself and the entire Fifth Fleet to buy time for the civilian transports. One by one, humanity's leaders had fallen until only the archive ship crews remained. And now the Kathmoran wanted to negotiate. Sarah pulled up the tactical display showing the positions of the remaining archive ships. The Shadowhawk had managed to establish contact with 11 vessels over the past week. Each ship carried fragments of human civilization, technological archives, cultural databases, genetic samples, and most importantly, the quantum trigger codes for the stellar cascade weapons. The weapons themselves were already deployed. Following protocols established during the darkest days of the war, human ships had seeded 57 Dominion systems with quantum cascade devices. The weapons were invisible to conventional sensors, designed to appear as nothing more than space debris until activated. Once triggered, they would destabilize the quantum forces holding their target stars together. Sarah opened a secure communication channel to the other archive ships. The faces that appeared on her screen were haggard and worn, marked by loss and exhaustion. These were the survivors of humanity's greatest catastrophe, carrying the responsibility for their species' future. Captain Elena Vasquez of the archive ship Remembrance spoke first. "Commander, we've all received the Dominion transmission. What's your assessment?" "They're afraid," Sarah replied simply. "Our intelligence reports suggest they've detected the quantum signatures from the Cascade devices. They know what's coming." Dr. Michael Chang, the civilian mission director aboard the Heritage, leaned forward on his display. "The question is whether we can trust them to honor any agreement. The Dominion has a long history of breaking treaties with species they consider inferior." Sarah had been wrestling with the same question. The Catamaran had offered no mercy during their conquest of human space. Entire worlds had been sterilized to prevent resistance movements. Millions of humans had been forced into labor camps where they died from exhaustion and disease. The idea of negotiating with the architects of genocide felt like a betrayal of everyone they had lost. But Sarah also understood the weight of the decision they faced. The stellar Cascade weapons would destroy more than Dominion military forces. Each collapsing star would kill billions of Kethmoran civilians, including children who had no part in their government's policies of conquest. Captain James Wong of the Eternal Vigil voiced what they were all thinking. "If we trigger the Cascade Protocol, we become exactly what they are. Mass murderers on a galactic scale. And if we don't," Captain Vasquez responded, "how do we know they won't simply resume their conquest operations once the immediate threat is removed?" Sarah called up the intelligence reports from the past week. Dominion forces were evacuating their core systems at an unprecedented rate. Military fleets were withdrawing to fallback positions. Research facilities were being abandoned. The mere threat of the Cascade weapons had achieved what 3 years of conventional warfare could not. It had forced the Dominion to retreat. "The Cascade Protocol was never intended as a weapon of conquest," Sarah said. "It was designed as a final deterrent, a way to ensure that defeating humanity would be too costly for any empire to contemplate." Dr. Chang nodded thoughtfully. "The question is whether the deterrent effect will persist if we choose not to use it. Will the Dominion respect our restraint, or will they interpret it as weakness?" Sarah manipulated the tactical display to show the current positions of Dominion fleets. The evacuation pattern suggested that Coltan was taking the threat seriously. But the Supreme War Leader was also repositioning his forces to minimize losses while maintaining strategic capability. If negotiations failed, the Dominion would still possess the strength to resume offensive operations. The communication channel chimed as another archive ship joined the conference. Commander Alex Rivera of the New Dawn appeared on screen, his face grim. "I've been monitoring Dominion communications traffic. They're not just evacuating military personnel, they're pulling civilians out of the affected systems as well. Entire populations are being relocated to backup worlds." The news hit Sarah like a physical blow. If the Dominion was evacuating civilians, it suggested they were genuinely afraid of the Cascade weapons, but it also meant that triggering the weapons would primarily destroy empty infrastructure rather than populated worlds. "How long until the evacuations are complete?" Sarah asked. Rivera consulted his intelligence displays. "Current estimates suggest another 8 hours for essential personnel, perhaps 18 hours for complete civilian evacuation." Sarah felt the weight of command settling on her shoulders. The Dominion was buying time, removing their people from the target systems while maintaining the threat of military retaliation. If humanity waited too long to decide, they might find themselves negotiating from a position of reduced leverage. The quantum cascade devices were designed with built-in time limits. Each weapon would remain active for approximately 72 hours before its quantum entanglement matrix began to decay. After that point, the devices would become inert, unable to trigger the stellar collapses. Humanity had perhaps 50 hours remaining before their ultimate deterrent became useless. Captain Vasquez raised the question that was haunting all of them. Even if we choose to negotiate, what do we demand? Our worlds are destroyed. Our people are dead or enslaved. What could the Dominion possibly offer that would justify sparing them? Sarah had been considering that question since Coltan's transmission arrived. Traditional war objectives like territorial concessions or reparations were meaningless when dealing with a species facing extinction. But there might be other possibilities. "Survival," Sarah said finally. "We demand the right to exist, permanent territorial guarantees for human settlements, the release of all human prisoners and slaves. Most importantly, enforceable agreements that prevent the Dominion from resuming conquest operations against humanity or any other species." Dr. Chang looked skeptical. "How do we enforce such agreements? The moment we deactivate the Cascade weapons, we lose our primary source of leverage." "We don't deactivate all of them," Sarah replied. We propose a graduated disarmament protocol. The Dominion demonstrates good faith by meeting specific conditions, and we gradually reduce the number of active weapons. But we maintain a core deterrent force indefinitely. The idea of permanent deterrence was both attractive and terrifying. It would prevent future Dominion aggression, but it would also make humanity responsible for maintaining weapons capable of destroying entire civilizations. Future generations of humans would inherit the burden of deciding when, if ever, such weapons should be used. Commander Rivera highlighted another concern. The other galactic powers are watching this situation carefully. If we successfully negotiate with the Dominion using stellar weapons as leverage, other species might decide to develop similar capabilities. We could be starting an arms race that destroys the galaxy. Sarah had received intelligence reports suggesting that several neutral powers were already accelerating their weapons research programs. The Altarian Republic had launched 3 deep space research expeditions in the past month. The Vegan Confederacy had begun constructing massive particle accelerators in remote star systems. Humanity's stellar weapons had fundamentally changed the strategic balance of the galaxy. But the alternative to negotiation was unthinkable. Triggering the Cascade Protocol would destroy the Dominion, but it would also mark humanity as a species willing to commit genocide rather than accept defeat. The moral implications would haunt human civilization for generations. Sarah made her decision. I'm going to respond to Coltan's transmission. We'll offer to negotiate, but with conditions. The Dominion has 24 hours to demonstrate good faith by releasing human prisoners and ceasing all military operations against neutral powers. If they comply, we'll begin formal peace talks. The other Archive ship commanders debated the proposal for nearly an hour. Some argued for triggering the weapons immediately, believing that the Dominion could never be trusted. Others suggested demanding more extensive concessions before agreeing to talks. In the end, they voted to support Sarah's approach. The transmission to Supreme War Leader Coltan was carefully crafted to demonstrate both humanity's strength and their willingness to find a peaceful solution. Supreme War Leader Coltan, this is Lieutenant Commander Sarah Voss, speaking for the surviving human archive fleets. We are prepared to discuss terms for ending our conflict, but we require immediate demonstration of your good faith. You have 24 hours to cease all military operations against neutral powers and begin releasing human prisoners from your labor camps. Failure to comply will result in the immediate activation of our stellar cascade weapons. As the transmission propagated across subspace toward Dominion space, Sarah wondered if she had made the right choice. The cascade weapons represented humanity's final trump card, the one threat that could force the mighty Dominion to the negotiating table. But using them would make humans complicit in the destruction of billions of innocent lives. The countdown timer on her console showed 50 to 1 hours remaining until quantum matrix decay. In just over 2 days, humanity would discover whether their greatest enemy could become a partner in preventing galactic genocide. Sarah activated the ship's internal communication system and addressed her small crew. All hands, this is the commander. We are about to begin negotiations that will determine the future of human civilization. We carry not just the technological heritage of our species, but also the moral responsibility to choose wisely between vengeance and justice. She paused, looking out at the stars through the observation deck. Each point of light represented countless worlds, billions of lives hanging in the balance between war and peace. We have the power to destroy our enemies completely. But our ancestors sent us into the darkness not as instruments of vengeance, but as guardians of human values. Today we discover whether those values are strong enough to prevent us from becoming the monsters we fought against. The Shadowhawk continued its lonely voyage through the void between stars, carrying the weight of impossible choices toward an uncertain future. Behind them, the quantum cascade weapons waited silently in 57 star systems, counting down the seconds until humanity would choose between justice and genocide. In the end, the war that had claimed billions of lives would be decided not by the strength of weapons, but by the courage to show mercy to those who had shown none in return. The greatest test of humanity's character lay not in their ability to destroy their enemies, but in their willingness to spare them. The galaxy waited to see which choice they would make.